Alderholt Podcast.
Well, hello there. It is very good to have you with me here this afternoon. I have barricaded myself into the house as it is absolutely lashing it down outside. I have a big box of biscuits and a big hot cup of coffee in front of me. So thank you, and I hope you're going to enjoy joining me for the next little while. I hope you enjoyed the little intro. I'm going for the cute effect with my little boy Matthew recording the intro for me there. Well, I am so pleased to have you with me, whether this is the first time you've tuned in or whether you tuned into my first test podcast back in October. Whatever the reason, it is good to have you here with me. Now, to start with, I want to share something with you. I am considering doing something a little bit foolish, a little bit silly, and really, I'm probably looking for people to either join me or to talk me out of it. Some people say that after you've had a baby, that you forget instantly about the pain. Well, never having done that myself, I do have a similar experience of, I think, forgetting about the pain that I went through. Back in 2005, I ran the London Marathon, and agonisingly dragged myself through the training for it, and then dragged myself round the event in about 5 hours. Ended up actually running the last few miles with a pop star called Sunita, who I believe was quite famous at one point in the 80s. I didn't actually know who she was, which did lead me to ask her what she did for a job, which was all slightly embarrassing. Well, anyhow, it appears that 5 years seems to be the optimum length of time for forgetting how much work and how much effort it took me to get myself round that course back in 2005. So I am considering running another marathon, 26 miles, 385 yards, and I'm thinking about entering the North Dorset Marathon, which I believe takes place in May. So I am, firstly, like I say, I am perhaps looking for somebody to talk me out of it, but more than likely, I'm looking for anyone who is mad enough to consider joining me to do this. I'm looking for training partners, for people. You don't have to be brilliant runners. Perhaps you like to have a casual run. Perhaps you've done no running at all for a number of years. Well, perhaps you want to give something a go. Perhaps a New Year's resolution for you, bit early, but that's something you could be thinking about. I would love to hear from you. I'm going to be looking to raise some money for some good causes around Alderholt and Dorset. So it's not just a foolish thing just for the sake of it. Actually, everything will be going towards a good cause. So please, please, please do get in touch if you have even the slightest inkling of wanting to participate in that. I can tell you a little bit more about it and what would be involved. So this is the second edition of Made in Alderholt. This is the first proper edition. The first one was a bit of a test run, and like I say, we're going to have an interview with Pip Martin coming up a little bit later in the show, and each month the idea is to have an interview with another special guest. The first podcast seemed to go down well. We've had a number of listeners, a number of people who've given a bit of feedback to me about how they found it, but we would like to promote the podcast as widely as possible, so that more and more people can listen in and find out a bit about what's going on in the local area. We've got an article out in the parish news, which is going to hopefully help us to increase our listeners. But also I have some postcards, or some little business cards actually, which give details about how you can access the podcast. And I would love you to join me in promoting this around Alderholt, around the village, around the parish. You'll find some of them are in the co-op by the little post office. But if you have any way of promoting this, please do that. Let as many people know as possible, because I would love to get our listenership up as high as possible. So can't do that alone. Please join me in making that happen. So coming up after this jingle, we will be speaking to Vicar Philip of St James's Church fame. Well, it is good to be here with Vicar Pip Martin from St James's Church. We had a celebration just over a week ago now, wasn't it? When we looked at and celebrated your 25 years as a priest and 20 years in Alderholt. I guess some of our listeners might know you well, some of them probably know you less well. And I want to take you right back to the start and tell us, why Alderholt? What on earth possessed you to come to Alderholt?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here on this windy morning while we're recording this. And and if any of you got to my celebration, do thank you. And if you didn't, well, it was good fun. Why Alderholt all those years ago, 20 years ago? It's like lots of things in life. It was a little bit accidental. I was looking for a job, and these days, would you believe it, vicars' jobs do get advertised in a kind of trade paper called the Church Times. And this one was advertised as a large village on the edge of the New Forest, very suitable for a first incumbency. That means your first job where you're kind of running a parish, called Aldershot. And I got out my Ordnance Survey map and figured that this probably wasn't right and that actually it was Alderholt. And applied for the job.
Bit of a classic mistake. One of the first things I was told was that your post will end up in Aldershot.
That's right. They whether all the other candidates thought they were applying for to be vicar of a large garrison town, I'm not sure. Perhaps that's why I got the job. But my wife and I came down. We looked at the place. We just liked it and felt we could just be at home here and we'll give it a best try, and applied, and eventually I was appointed, and the rest is 20 years of history. So, yeah.
So 20 years is quite a long time, I think, for a priest to stay in one place.
It is, and I think there's been one vicar of Alderholt longer than that. He's commemorated at the bottom of the churchyard with that great big cross, if ever you're there, called James Sanderson, and he was here about 22 or 3 years, and he died about 2 or 3 years older than I am now, very suddenly of a heart attack. So I've got a bit of a challenge there. See if I can outlast the Reverend James Sanderson.
Right, okay. So back there 20 years ago, did you ever consider that you would stay this long?
Well, probably not. I knew I wouldn't want to be rushing on somewhere else. I guess I'm not sure this is a good thing or a bad thing for a vicar, but I'm not ambitious for sort of to be an archdeacon or a bishop or anything like that. Not that I would ever be even remotely considered for such a position, but I feel that wherever there's people, there's work to be done, and it's not for me to kind of cast my eyes on some other kind of job, really. And it just hasn't ever sort of just come along or happened. And for my family, it's been a wonderful thing to live here and be settled here for all those years.
Great. Well, in the period of time you've been here, I'm sure there must have been some highlights, some memorable experiences. I don't know if anything pops to mind of some of those highlights.
Well, the other Sunday night was a good one, my celebration. The funny thing is that you'd think after 20 years it will get very routine, and just going through the same things. And if it did, then I would certainly want to move. But it never does. Life is never dull, and new things seem to happen every year. That's partly because I tend to come up with ideas, some of which are daft and some of which are not so daft. And so we keep trying slightly different things. But over the years, I think one of the great things has been the annual festival, which a lot of people will be aware of, whether or not they attached to St James Church, and that was a deliberate effort really to place the church at the heart of the community, even though the church physically is right outside the village. And that's been wonderful, in the Alderholt Giant tradition and the procession and the wonderful services we've had around. So that's been a highlight.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to cut in there and get you to tell me a bit more about this Alderholt Giant tradition, because I know nothing about it, and I've seen some photos, and it's all new and strange to me.
Yeah, well, it depends who you talk to, Lewis, and as to what you believe about the Alderholt Giant. There is a popular legend that it all derives from the Middle Ages and pilgrims returning from northern Spain, pilgrimage to Santiago in northern Spain, which was very popular right through the Middle Ages, and coming back with tales of festival giants in northern Spain encountered there, and the tradition began there. There's another tradition which says that the Vicar of Alderholt about 18 years ago was in the pub with a local carpenter and joiner and one or two other crazy people, and they dreamed up the idea of an Alderholt giant which would be even bigger than the Salisbury giant, which you can see in the museum in Salisbury, and which never sets foot outside the museum. And I think over a pint, the then Vicar of Alderholt 18 years ago said, we can do something bigger and better than Salisbury, and our giant will go out on the streets.
Right, so it's...
So it depends who you can believe what story you like.
Okay, great. Well, it kind of leads nicely to perhaps some of the funniest experiences. Imagine you're involved in lots and lots of things. In 20 years, I'm sure there must have been some funny moments.
Well, yeah, probably most of them I don't relate really, because they involve people. But well, the Alderholt giant, when we first wheeled it out, it was even taller than it presently is, and we started off from the Churchill Arms, and I got a bunch of people who drank regularly in the Churchill Arms to help to pull it. Well, what they didn't realise was that pulling a giant was a doddle. There's no weight to it really, but it had tiny wheels. At that point, we made them slightly more manoeuvrable now, so steering it was quite difficult. And all these guys came out of the pub and rolled up their sleeves. We had somebody else who decided to hide inside, David Cozier, now passed to his rest, dear David, with a water pistol. This was his great idea, was to sort of kind of hover inside the giant. Well, all these guys picked up the ropes and gave the great haul on the giant. It shot across the road and crashed into the little wall that was then opposite the pub and nearly toppled over.
Right.
David was thrown out with bruised shins, and I looked around expecting the police to tell us, sorry guys, this can't go ahead. No way can you do this, not safe, not roadworthy. And I was very glad to see our local coppers just bent over backwards, laughing their heads off, and I realised we were okay here.
It's being a priest, being a vicar it's an unusual job. It's one that perhaps people maybe struggle to get their head around what actually your kind of day-to-day work involves. But what is it about your role which gives you the greatest enjoyment? There must be something which kind of keeps you going after 25 years.
Yes. It's an extraordinary privilege, really, because as a priest, you have this connection with all kinds of people, and even despite my failings, any priest's failings, a connection with God as well. So you're able to kind of touch people at some of the happiest times, at some of the saddest times, and you are called on really to help, I suppose, make that connection for people between their lives, with their struggles, with their joys, with whatever's going on, the laughter and the tears, helping make connections between people's lives and a bigger picture, and even, the story, God's presence in the world. So it's an extraordinary privilege, and I just think I've been at times when I've gone straight from some house where there's people really posh, where there's loads of money, and then gone straight from there to some house where there's not two coins to rub together, and I'm equally welcome, and I've got an equal kind of opportunity in both households just to speak to people heart to heart. So it's just an immense privilege. Tough at times, but what job isn't? So no complaints.
Right.